Couple of things to ponder as we fully appreciate the seismic events of the past couple of days. A good night's sleep and a clear head to think through some of this. In the battle of ideologies, and that's what this Ashes was, BazBall prevailed. We noted as the series started, this was more than a tactic for Test cricket. It was England's new religion, and Ben Stokes' men believed in it with the fervour of a cult. This is the way. BazBall dictated every aspect of the series. Australia shelved its natural instinct and national character and spent all its energies trying to counter and corner the raw aggression of its opponents. Australia played England's game. At times, I think Pat Cummins had the team boxing left-handed, so to speak. At crucial stages, Australia was off balance. The excesses of BazBall allowed Australia the chance to land telling blows early in the series to claim a lead. But I think if you look back, once Stokes harnessed the full force of BazBall in the fourth innings at Lords, they progressively weakened Australia and became the dominant force. The more brazen England became, the more Australia covered up. It felt like a deliberate counterpoint. By the end, the run rates were a startling contrast, 4.6 versus 3.18. There were more extreme comparisons on various days than that as well, and therein lay the ideological struggle. It also infected the melodrama that at times overwhelmed the cricket, right down to the missed drinks invitation at the end. England adopted a superiority and it became an infallibility. Australia found that galling and intolerable, and too many of us lost hours of our lives arguing with Piers Morgan, not realising that we were again playing England's game. Ultimately, England couldn't land the knockout, but when they raised their arms at the final bell, looked far more the winners than the forced smiles of those raising the trophy. BazBall prevailed in the battle of ideologies. This is the way. One of my favourite exercises the morning after a series is to study the averages. I've done this since I was a kid. I doubt I'm alone, but there's probably only a subset of us who do this sort of thing. England had 5 batters average more than 40. Australia had 2. The engine room of Labuschagne, Smith and Head were mired in the 30s. And of the 11 batters who played all 5 tests, Dave Warner sat 11th for runs scored and average. While Australia might have looked impotent with ball in hand under the assault of BazBall from time to time, it failed to win the series because of its batting. That will be the stone-cold reality as the dust settles. So you've had my tin pot theories, you've shared yours. Let's get a bit of expert analysis, shall we, with former Australian captain Tim Paine. Tim, welcome.
Morning, Jared. How are you?
Did you get an uninterrupted night's sleep?
Yeah, pretty good last night,
Yes.
I must admit. Whilst it's sad, I think the Ashes is done. I'm certainly looking forward to getting back on a normal sleep pot, which would be nice.
Who won the ideological battle? I think BazBall prevailed. What do you think?
Yeah, I tend to agree with the captains. I think 2-2 was a pretty fair end. I know England will claim the moral victory because of the brand of cricket they played, but at the end of the day, it's about winning Test cricket. Whilst I thoroughly enjoyed the way England played, I think the 2-2 was fair. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and we're going to see that more and more going forward. It was a nice change what England have done, and I think we'll see more of it going forward. But moral victories, it's 2-2. It was a draw.
What did you think of in the overall? What did you think of Australia's tactics to counter BazBall?
I didn't look so much at the tactics as getting it wrong at times. I just don't think we executed as well as what we would have liked. I think the way England play, everyone's going to set boundary riders very early to them because they are trying to be aggressive and trying to find boundaries early, trying to put you on the back foot. If you can stem that and keep them under pressure from both ends with the ball, I think you'll create a lot of opportunities. We just didn't bowl well enough, and I thought the first innings the other night was a perfect example of that, where Ben Duckett scored 5 or 6 of these boundaries through the leg side, where we had no field out there. So clearly we were mis-executing the plan rather than the plan itself being wrong. I think he had boundary riders on the offside, and we're getting hit for 5 or 6 boundaries behind square on the leg side. So clearly that's an execution thing, and I found that a little bit throughout the whole series. particularly with the new ball, where I thought we would make some serious inroads.
The body language at the end, so the final bell rang and England was standing with arms raised, and Australia sort of had to force those awkward smiles as you raised the trophy, which we mentioned last week was an experience that you've lived. And it was hard to miss, in Pat Cummins' words, just the missed opportunity that from 2-0 up they weren't able to grasp.
Yeah, and there is no doubt they'll put on a brave face, but there's no doubt they'll be hurting. But you're 2-0 up away from home. We've spoken a lot about how hard it is to win in England, how hard it is to win in India, and to have it in the grasp of your hand and to let it slip a few times. I mean, you don't want to harp on certain moments of Test series when it's 25 days of cricket, but I think both sides will probably look back and say, geez, we had some opportunities. I mean, you look at those first 2 tests, even from England's point of view, they had some opportunities to win those tests. The last 2 tests, they dominated. They could have won 4 quite easily. So it's the beauty of Test cricket, day to day, series to series, session to session. It can just ebb and flow when the quality of cricketer in both sides is of such a high standard. You've got so many guys that can win a game and change a game, in a spell or in a 2-hour batting, and I think that's why everyone is always so glued to the series that involve Australia and England, or India and England. And, what we need is some more teams to get to that level, but that's another story for another day.
I was the first night at the Oval, I had your words ringing in my ears. So Pat Cummins puts England in and Australia drops 5 catches. My God, I'll be having the same conversation I just had with Tim. I'll be having with Pat one day around the drop catches on day one at the Oval.
Yeah. Don't worry, I was sitting there myself. I was texting with a few people, and it was like a bit like the Headingley moment when Stokes was going off in the 3rd test as well. It was just deja vu. And I was sitting on the couch here at home sweating, just watching it, knowing that I'd been through it as well. And wasn't it horrible? Horrible to watch. And I actually thought personally, again, I mean, it says a lot because I've been there and done that. And one of the things I learnt personally, and I thought that I took forward after that, was in most conditions in a test match, I'll try and bat first. I thought that wicket the other day was a pretty good batting wicket. There's nothing worse than when you make that decision and then you let yourself down. And it was exactly as we did in 2019. We made probably a 50-50 decision to bowl first. And then when you can't execute in the field, it has a really negative flow-on effect on your group.
The melodrama of the series. So I think the quality of the 2005 cricket was better, but the melodrama of this series sort of adds to it all. And at times, maybe even at the expense of the cricket. How do you sort of rationalise all that took place, knowing that it runs all the way through to missing the beer in the change rooms at the end?
Yeah, well, that was disappointing, although I did see Ben Stokes' tweet at 4 a.m. saying that they'd organised to catch up in a nightclub.
That's not really it, though, is it? That's not really
That's not how it's done. It's not how it's done. And it's not just about the players either. There's as we saw with a few tweets online last week, there's a lot of staff and a lot of people put their lives on hold, and a lot of people are invested in that series from both sides of the team. It's not just about the players getting together and having a beer. It's about the staff. It's about the media managers. It's about the security people. It's about families. It's everyone who lives in this bubble for 8-9 weeks to be able to relax and share their side of it and get to know each other. And I think the change room is a really important part of that. And something I know the Ashes series I was involved in, it was always a really high priority of both sides. But in terms of the rest of the series, I think every Ashes series, there's always drama. And because, again, of how we look through it, our Aussie lens or our English lens, it just divides us even further, which is brilliant. But I don't think it overshadowed the series. Again, I think it added to it. It was borderline at Lords with the flow-over effect in the long room. But I think the way the players handled it was actually really good. I mean, they made their points really clear on both sides, whether it was the Stark catch, the Bairstow stumping, the ball swap in the last test. I thought the players handled it all pretty well. And as you said, the cricket wasn't quite to the standard of 2005 when you had absolute all-time greats. But in terms of pure entertainment factor and the little dramas that were going on around it, I thought this one was right up there.
What about the great ball switch caper, which there's a few of us who are struggling to get over it, but by the look of the text today.
Yeah, I find it mind-blowing that it can happen. However, again, what I don't like hearing players coming out and talking about it and whinging about it, because it wasn't England's fault. They didn't pick the ball. And from our batting perspective, we need to adjust to that really quickly and know, geez, the conditions are going to change. We're going to have to play a certain way for the next hour to get through it. But to have two highly, highly experienced umpires pick a ball, one that's borderline about to, or is reverse swinging a little bit, and he's soft, to one that's brand new, both sides, and he's rock hard. And then I think I heard Usman say that the excuse he was given was there was nothing else in the box. I mean, you'd think for the amount of delays we have in Test cricket now, for people standing up and moving behind the side screen, we could have taken 2 more minutes to get the right ball, couldn't we? So that's my first point with it. And my second point is that this is something that's been going on in cricket. And again, maybe fans who aren't in the inner sanctum don't see this. What happens in Test cricket a lot now is as soon as the ball stops swinging or it goes a little bit soft, the captain or the mid-off will be instructed to take that ball to the umpire as many times as you can until we can get it changed. Because we can't get Usman Khawaja or a Steve Smith or a Joe Root out if the ball is soft and not swinging. You won't get them out. And everyone knows that. And what I'd like to see is the ICC and the umpires wake up to it a little bit. It's a bit the same when all the different thing, but the same when the ball stuff was going on, people were either rubbing mints in it or sunscreen. Sandpaper was absolutely a step too far. But to suggest the umpires had no understanding of what was going on in world cricket at the time was poor. And if it was policed better, it wouldn't have happened. And this is the same for me. As soon as it stops swinging, gets too soft, we just hound the umpires until they change it. And they give in way too easily. And what happens is the ball you get is always completely different regardless. It's very hard to find very similar cricket balls, although you'd like to get them closer than that one. But again, I think it's something that is, if it's policed better, it just won't happen.
Yeah, there's a progressive petitioning that you see that you've described that so well. So the last one overall was, is this the series that Test cricket needed? And I feel like this breaks both ways. It enthralled us, but it also shows that Ashes Test cricket is removed from the rest of the Test cricket calendar, and maybe only India and India. Oh no, India full stop. So there's a pushback against the big three, except that the big three play the most compelling cricket, and we're going to have to wait 2.5 years for the next Ashes. So I feel like that breaks both ways.
Yeah, I agree. I can't remember an Ashes series, probably barring the last one where we absolutely dominated here in Australia. But even that, every Ashes generates a huge amount of fans watching the game. And I think Ben and Baz probably take it a bit too far sometimes. I mean, thanks for playing BazBall, but it hasn't absolutely changed the game. The Ashes is the Ashes. The Ashes is always going to get this sort of attention, regardless, and some little things like the stumping or whatever add to it. But to suggest that it's changed the game of Test cricket, no, it hasn't. It's still got huge problems. If it, like you said, if it's Australia, England, and India playing against each other, millions and millions of eyeballs are going to be watching. At the moment, India are playing the West Indies. I don't even think most casual cricket people would know that series is on. South Africa's dropped away desperately. New Zealand isn't quite what they are, and they're aging players like Kane Williamson and Trent Bolt and Tim Southey. They're going to be moved on really soon. What's coming through there, we don't know. The West Indies have dropped a staggering amount. So whilst it was awesome and we loved watching it, I think every Ashes series is the same. What we need to do is figure out a way to get another 4 or 5 teams back up to this standard. So every series is as competitive and as compelling as this one. And if it is, we see like Test cricket is the greatest format of cricket, without doubt.
Tim Paine is with me. We're going to dive deep into the numbers, study the averages at the close of this Ashes series next. Tim Paine is with me the day after the Ashes. We study the averages. So let's start with Australia's batting. Mitch Marsh, 3 tests, an average of 50. Usman Khawaja, leading run scorer overall, 496 runs at 49.6. Then Australia's engine room, all mired in the 30s. Steve Smith, 37.3. Travis Head, 36.2. Marnus Labuschagne, 32.8. a century for Smith, a century for Labuschagne, but not for Head. And then Dave Warner, 285 runs at 28.5. England had 5 batters above the 40-run average threshold. Australia only had 2. Tim, give us your assessment as we crunch the numbers on the Australian batting.
Well, yeah, I think they'd be disappointed, no doubt about that. I think if the two biggest things that stood out to me throughout the series, and it shows up in the Ashes, is one, our inability to score hundreds, which we've normally, certainly these guys, David Warner, Usman Khawaja, Marnus, Steve, Travis Head, would pride themselves on at all levels of cricket they've always played. And then secondly, as a team, I think we scored 400 plus once. Now, again, if you're going to win big tests and big test series, you need to be passing 400 in the first innings. That's almost your marker. If you can get 400 in the first innings, then you're in a great position to win most test matches. I don't know the exact percentage, but it's a very high percentage. So, again, yeah, I think I was surprised, to be honest. I thought that was where we would have an advantage over, is in the quality of our batting. But then thinking about it over the last few days, I look at their bowling attack versus our bowling attack and what they actually brought to the table. So I think if you look at the Aussies we've had, and they're all world-class bowlers, so it's not a dig at the individuals, but I think if you look at Pat Cummins, Josh Hazlewood, Scott Boland, and Greeny when he played, or Mitch Marsh, there's a real familiarity about all of them. Tall right armers who hit the wicket and rely on seam and bounce. So I think when the English batters got in, we only really had Stark, who gave a point of difference. Now, if you look at England's bowlers, you've got Stuart Broad, wide of the crease, can take it away from the left-handers. He then did the same thing to the right-handers and swung it the other way, knocked over Marnus a few times. You've got Mark Wood, who bowls with genuine speed from a different angle. You had Jimmy Anderson, who can swing the ball both ways at will, and Chris Wokes, who's that guy who can just test your defence. And if the wicket offers seam, he finds it. If he has to swing the ball, he can find it. So again, I think it was just, they're all right-arm bowlers as well, but a slight variation and different angle or speed from all of them is what made it hard for our guys to continue to bat for long periods of time, because I think they felt like they're always getting challenged in a different way, whereas our guys, as I said, are all tall, similar paced, not a lot of swing, hit the wicket, and when the seam wasn't there, they cashed in.
So in the cold numbers, what you've described there is perfect, because you don't get one without the other. Australia's 3, 4 and 5, so Smith, Head and Labuschagne, for none of them to average 40. So that you imagine they would take that quite personally.
Absolutely, they would. And again, David Warner as well. I think he's taken that personally over a career. That's something that's continued to bug him throughout his career, is his averages in England. And I think now those three, Marnus and Steve, traditionally have had really good records in England. And Travis Head, I think he was okay the last time he went. I think he's been steady. He hasn't been as good as what he'd been at home. So again, they're going to, will Steve Smith get back there for another crack? We're not sure, but certainly, Marnus and Travis Head, that will be something that will be driving them on towards the next Ashes series away, I would imagine. And again, they're going to have to find a way that works in those conditions, and that's part of being an elite international cricketer. And out of that top 5 or 6 at the moment was only really Usman and Steve Smith who have been able to do it over a period of time.
The bowling averages. So Murphy played the 2 tests, 7 wickets at 25.85. The bulk of the work is obviously Stark, 23 wickets at 27. Hazlewood, 16 wickets at 31.7. And Cummins, 18 wickets at 37.7. Now, Lyon played the 2 tests and took 9 wickets at 29.3. Cam Green played the 3 tests. He took 5 wickets at 47. Mitch Marsh played the 3 tests. He took 3 wickets at 55.7. And Scott Boland played 2 matches. He took 2 wickets at 115.5. What do you think looking into the averages on the bowling front?
Well, again, I think Mitchell Stark's probably the only one who's managed to strike the averages around the same as his career average. The difference this series for me with Starkey, I think we got from Starkey what we always get from him. The difference for me from this series was the other guys, and it was more around economy rates and averages. If you look at our fast bowling brigade, we haven't had one bowler bowl at under 4 and over. So whilst Mitchell Starc is normally that strike weapon that can come on and take wickets and take them quickly, he's normally expensive. But you've normally got Josh Hazlewood, Scott Boland, and Pat Cummins hammering away at the other end, going at 2 and over. So if he can have the same impact like he has, we're normally bowling teams out for 200. The difference this series was they were scoring off Pat, Josh, Greeny, Boland. When they bowled, they were scoring at 4.5, 5 and over. So they got big totals really quickly. Sort of took even though Starkey was great, it took his impact out of it a little bit, I think, because we managed to score so quickly off the others. So, and again, what do you do there? You have to give credit to England.
Yeah.
I don't think our bowlers, those guys have never been put under that sort of pressure. They've had to bowl long periods of times on flat wickets at time. They haven't had guys go, we're just going to take you down and do it. And I think we saw that's where they struggled. They didn't have the answers as much as what other teams may have had, or even with Pat, who's a young captain, at times you could see he wasn't quite sure what to do because they've never experienced that.
Yep.
Our fast bowlers have got amazing records. Everywhere they go, they have never had guys come out and throw the first punch. Guys try and absorb our attack and try and make them bowl long periods and hope they tire. They've shown over 10 years they don't too often.
Yep.
Very rarely. So, again, I thought the way England played took so much courage because it could have gone pear-shaped against that attack. Having said that, like I said, with our bowlers who are that tall into the wicket, require a bit of seam movement, England prepared wickets that they knew would take them out of the game. So clever and very well executed from their batters, which I think threw our guys. I think our guys knew it was coming, but just didn't think they would be able to pull it off. That's what it looked like to me.
Yep. Great analysis. I love the averages the day after a test series. Tim, thanks for taking us through them and giving us your views on a series. It'll be debated for many a year to come, this series. It's great to do it with you on this Wednesday.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Good on you. Tim Paine, former Australian captain. He's hosting the SEN Tasmania breakfast show 6 till 8 on Mondays and Fridays.